pottery studio in a box. Let's break it down. So in this video I'm going to show you exactly what you need to get started with pottery. I'll show you a few basic tools and bits and pieces that you might need, but all you really need is clay. So as soon as you've got the clay, you can start making pottery. However, a few basic things might make your pottery experience a little bit easier. So first off, you will need somewhere to store all of your pottery things, your tools, your clay, all the extra bits. And I would highly recommend a box like this, a wooden box that's kind of sort of porous. I got this one, I think, from the Works. I think they also sell them in Hobbycraft. You can probably get them online pretty easily. It's just untreated wood. Often people buy these and then they paint them with acrylic paint, but I find that because it's a porous box, you can use it then as it sort of doubles up as your work surface. So a lot of people will get like a chopping board, again, porous chopping board, because you can get chopping boards. I don't know if it's going to come up on camera, but this one, it's sort of got a varnish to it. I've used this in the past, but it has been a bit tricky, because what happens is when you, say for example, you wanted to roll out a piece of clay and then cut out a shape, what can happen is when you try to then get that shape off the chopping board, it can stick to the varnish because it's not dried out the clay at all. It's got this like weird hold on the clay, so it just sort of deforms the shape that you've just spent a little while trying to cut out. It's deformed it, or it even sort of as you're pulling up the clay, it sort of rips the clay. So I would highly recommend avoiding a varnished surface. So something porous like this box is ideal, but you can definitely use cardboard, you can use paper, so don't stress too much if you don't want to have a container that's also your work surface, because most of the time now I use this lovely bag that was gifted to me by Sula. Shout out to Sula. I take this to my pottery sessions every Tuesday, and it's got all of my sort of advanced tools, and it's got a place for all of my tools, which is why I love it. And it's got, you know, in a little bag, and then that's got all like lots of little places to put all your tools. So I tend to use this, and then my work surface is my pottery studio or my art studio. But for someone starting off, like when I was first starting off, I just had one little area to keep all my things, because when you're starting a new hobby, you might not want to invest in a lot, so having a small container kind of keeps you a bit more mindful of what you're buying, and then will it fit in the container I'm using. So start off, I'm just going to run through everything that I include in the box that I first started off with. I'm going to cover this because it's got a naughty word. It's pottery stuff, but change the word stuff to a swear word. So this is where I jot down all of my ideas. It is just a lined paper, like notebook. So this is where I sort of plan out pottery videos for my clients, but I also have another sketchbook where I can show you some like examples of things. So anytime you get an idea of what you want to make using clay, you'll always have somewhere to jot down those ideas, and it can just be your pottery like idea landing page. Landing page? What am I talking about? It can be your pottery sketchbook. It does, you know, sketchbooks aren't just for illustrators or painters or whatever, they can be for anything. So I would highly recommend a sketchbook, and I do have one in here somewhere, and then either a pen like I often use, or a pencil. So a sketchbook and pencil in the box, so that sometimes, you know, you feel like you might want to do pottery, but then you don't know what to make, but you might have ideas that, like, you know, oh, I kind of need to rough out this idea to see if it's going to work, or maybe you've got an idea that you don't want to build today but you want to work on in the future. So it's handy to have a sketchbook in your pottery kit. Next, highly recommend some kind of clay. It can be air dry clay, it can be clay that you're going to fire, it can be what's it called, polymer clay even, but these videos that I'm making on this channel are predominantly going to focus on either air dry clay or clay that you can fire. I have worked with polymer clay in the past, so if anyone wants to know a little bit more about polymer clay, I can definitely do a video on that. But yeah, I would recommend some kind of clay. If you're a beginner, I would recommend air dry clay. It's there's less pressure with it. You don't have to, you know, figure out what's going to happen in the kiln, because you've got to wedge your clay if you're going to fire it, and there's a few more extra, you know, there's a few extra steps involved with fired clay. So if you're a beginner, maybe start off with air dry clay, see if you like working with it, and then you can progress on to other things. So yeah, clay in your kit. Then I would recommend you buy some really basic wooden pottery tools. And the reason I say wooden is because you can get pottery tools that are made of plastic or even metal, and like I mentioned earlier, when you're working with clay, it can stick to like things that are metal or plastic, things that aren't porous, and it can make things a little bit more difficult to work with. You definitely can still work with plastic or metal tools if you've already got some. Like, I know some people use old icing decorating tools as pottery tools because maybe they've stopped, you know, doing bakery things and they want to move on to pottery. You can definitely reuse old tools. You can even use kitchen utensils. There's a surprising amount of pottery tools that come from your kitchen. But yeah, just to start off, I would recommend some basic tools. Some kind of knife tool. So obviously for cutting your clay, you can also make some fun textures with all of these tools as well. But some kind of tool that will help you cut your clay. Some kind of pointy tool. So this is a needle tool. You can also use a paper clip that has been, you know, unwound. You could definitely use I'm trying to think what else, but you could use like a sewing needle, but I would recommend attaching it to something. But if you're buying a few things to start off, just go out and buy the wooden needle tool. And I should I should suggest what you can do with them. So with a needle tool, this is used for attaching clay to clay. So you can score your clay by adding lots and lots of lines in a sort of crosshatch pattern on both pieces of clay, and then you sort of use water and then attach them. So handy for making score lines. But this tool as well is also good for making score lines. It's called a blending tool. But you can also use it for scoring. So if I have just attached two pieces of clay together, I will use this side, the sort of serrated side, to rough out the join, and then I will use this side then to smooth it out, so it's handy. Like, it's like a step 1, step 2 situation. And then this last one is called a ribbon tool. Not like hugely necessary, but it's really helpful. So these two different shapes do different things. So you can carve different designs into your clay. You can take bits of clay away. Say you wanted to even out a certain part of your, like, say you're making a pot and one part of the pot is higher than the other. You can use either end to take just the right amount of clay off that you want, and then just smooth it out. So it's a really handy tool to have. Next, I would recommend, in terms of tools, some paintbrushes. So paintbrushes are really useful for smoothing out certain areas that your fingers can't quite reach. So say you've attached two pieces together to make, I don't know, a ear of a bear. Trying to get do I have mine anywhere? Oh, so I'll explain with this little cat. So say I was trying to smooth out this little area, because it's like a pointy area where it's joined, I'm not going to be able to fully smooth that area, whereas with a paintbrush I will be able to get in to any kind of smaller details. So really handy to have some paintbrushes. Next, a rolling pin, and then some kind of guide. So they're called rolling pin guides, but you can definitely use scrap wood like I have. So I'm just going to kind of show you. You'd put your guides flat on your surface, you'd put your clay, and then you would just roll out your clay, and then the fact that there's two pieces the same height keeps your clay the same height then all the way as you're rolling it. Without it, it can, depending on how much pressure you're putting on your clay, you might have a really thick part and then, you know, a thinner part if you put more pressure. So handy to have these guides if you want consistent rolls with your clay. Also, when you're rolling out clay, just in case I mention it, it's called a slab of clay when you roll out clay. Next, what else do we have? So I would also put in my little box a dish to contain some water and a sponge to go with it. So a sponge is really useful for smoothing out clay when you're pretty much done with your piece and you want it to look a little bit more polished. It also helps for blending as well. So say you've just used your blending tool and you just want to smooth out that little area a little bit more, you can dip your sponge in the water, squeeze out all the water just so it's like ever so slightly damp, and then you can use that then to just finish off that blending. It's also handy as well to use your dish and your sponge to clean off all your tools before you rinse them under your sink. If you're fortunate enough to have a pottery studio or an art studio, you will have, you know, maybe you'll have access to some kind of clay trap or a sink trap, or I'm not actually sure of what it's called. Clay trap? I think it's called a clay trap. I'm doubting myself. Yeah, so basically you don't want clay going down into your plumbing, so pottery studios will have these clay traps, and it sort of filters out the clay so it's not just going into your standard plumbing. So it's best practice to wipe down all of your tools once you're done in this little dish. You can even wipe down your hands as well to get as much of the clay off as you can. And then that little dish of clay water, you can either let the water evaporate, and then that will take a couple of days, well, depending where you live, and then you can just scrape off that clay and put it in the bin. Clay can be recycled, so I would recommend not doing that. But if, you know, if this is something that you're only going to do once, then that would be your option. But you can also keep that clay and then add it to a bin over time, especially if you're not using air dry clay and you're using clay that can be fired. You can use that clay, store it in a bin, and then that can be put into something called reclaim. I can do a whole other video on recycling and reclaiming clay. Another thing you can also do, if you just want to get into this as a little sort of, I want to do this on the odd occasion, it's not something that you're going to really get into, you just want to have a little pottery box at home, you can also put that clay water into a plant pot, because clay comes from the ground, so you're just putting it back to where it came from. So that's also safe to do, it won't damage your plants. I say it won't damage your plants. Air dry clay, I'm not 100% sure, because it's got nylon like fibers and things, so maybe have a little Google into that. But if you're just using standard clay, you can just put it into the back into the earth. Another tool or tools are ribs. So these are metal ribs. I said earlier that it's best to have wooden tools because they're quite porous, but metal ribs are really useful for the end of your project, or for when your clay has dried a little bit and it's become something that's known as leather hard. So ribs are a way to smooth out your pieces so that they become, well, nice and polished looking. So you can use this serrated one to get rid of all the lumps and bumps, and then the smoother one then just to finish off your pieces, and it becomes really shiny almost. So I'll show some examples, hopefully, if I remember. Some extra pieces then. These are just some extra things that you might want to use for decorating or cutting out certain shapes. So you don't have to use these shapes specifically, but cookie cutters are really useful. So I've got these handy ones where I've got a circle on one side and then like a flowery sort of shape on the other side. I think they're used for Welsh cakes. But yeah, sort of cookie cutters in various shapes are really useful, because say you wanted to make, I don't know, like hanging decorations like for Christmas, you can definitely use those to make those for your tree or whatever you want. And on that note, icing, like fondant icing cutters are also really useful. You can see I have not washed this one. I've not kept up good pottery studio practices, but this one's clean, nice and clean. So this one, I don't know if it's gonna focus. Do the pottery, do the YouTube thing where, so you'll stamp it into your clay, and then this little button pushes out the clay, or the icing is what it's intended for. So these are quite useful for making smaller details and like adding texture. Another way to add some fun texture is see what you've got around your house. So this is the top of a perfume bottle, and I really like the lid of it because if I wanted to add like circular indents, this is what I use. And like things like little screws that you can like roll onto the clay to make patterns. You can stamp the ends of them into the clay, but you can pretty much use anything that has a fun texture that you like the look of. You think, ooh, I wonder what this could do in terms of texture. So have a look around your own house to see what might make a fun texture. Another thing could be fun to add fun textures is I'm not actually sure what the proper name for these things, but they're just like these little bottles, and they have like a wide sort of, I guess, needle spout. I'll put the actual name again on the screen, but they're used for slip trailing or slip trailing? Yeah, slip trailing. So you put a little bit of clay, dry clay preferably, maybe in like a bowl first, and then add some water so it's somewhat runny, mix it together, and then you put it in your bottle, and then you can use that to then make drawings on your clay. So again, I'll show some examples. You can also use these for decorating with different, what are they called? Underglazes. So you can use these to decorate and get fine lines with your underglaze. Again, I'm going to do another video about underglazes and glazes. Another thing which is really fun to have, especially if you want to customize things for people or for yourself, is some rubber stamps. You can use, I think there are different types of stamps. You can use metal stamps, but rubber stamps that are used for, like these ones I got from Tiger, and they came with like a little ink pad. I just put the ink pad with my other art supplies, and now I've got some stamps that I can use with clay. But I would recommend, when say you've rolled out a slab of clay, you just leave it to dry ever so slightly, so maybe 15-20 minutes, and then use the stamps. Or you can use a hairdryer as well, just to add just to dry out the clay a little bit, because when clay is tacky and you try to put a rubber stamp inside, when you pull it away, it pulls some of the clay away, so you're not actually stamping anything. So just be mindful, if you are going to use stamps, just leave the clay dry out a teeny bit. And then this last thing, I've put a napkin in just to remind myself. So you don't really need a napkin. You can have a napkin if you want, but I have a little dishcloth or like a hand towel in my pottery studio in general. But I took them all home recently to wash them. I didn't just throw them in my washing machine as well, just in case anyone's interested. I tend to lay out all of my sort of any pottery things, so like my pottery material, what's it called, my apron, any hand towels or washcloths, I'll lay them out flat on my garden, and then I'll use a hose pipe to really rinse off as much of that clay as possible, and then give it a little sort of scrub with the material and just sort of swish it together to get as much of that clay off as possible. Then I'll put it in the washing machine, because we want to try and save our washing machine and our plumbing. So I would highly recommend a cloth of some sort to go in your pottery kit. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much everything you'll need for a at-home pottery studio in a box. I will definitely do a video on some more advanced tools and also what you can achieve with each tool. So I'll do like a brief demonstration on each tool. Even these basic tools, there's some fun textures you can make using some really basic things. So maybe that will be my next video, I'm not sure. But any questions about getting started with pottery, let me know, and I will try my best to answer them either in the comments or in another video. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and like and subscribe, maybe? I don't know how to do this YouTube thing yet. Bye!